The perpetual feeling of walking on eggshells, the automatic apology that leaves your lips before you even know what you did wrong, the way you physically shrink in a crowded room. These aren't just quirks of an introverted personality. They are the deep, subtle scripts etched onto your soul by a childhood spent navigating the unstable terrain of narcissistic parenting. You learned early that your emotional survival depended on being a small target, on taking up less space, on making yourself disappear just enough so as not to disrupt the delicate, self-centered equilibrium of your parents' world. This is the invisible weight you carry into every adult interaction, a constant, low-grade humming of anxiety that asks, am I safe? Am I too much? We're not just talking about big traumas, but the everyday ways your system adapted to the unpredictable nature of love and validation, where connection was conditional and always required you to minimize your authentic self. Today, we're going to illuminate these ingrained habits, not to condemn them, but to finally give a name to the silent, lifelong suffering so you can begin the powerful, necessary work of reclaiming your rightful, full-sized self. The roots of this habit of self-diminishment run straight back to a childhood defined by emotional instability or profound absence, where a parent's feelings were the weather system that determined the emotional climate of the entire home. As a child, you weren't given the foundational security of unconditional acceptance. Instead, you were forced to orbit a parent who treated your needs, your feelings, and even your very existence as an inconvenience or, worse, a threat to their perfect self-image. This forced you into a constant state of internal calculation, where you began to internalize the terrifying burden of responsibility for the parents' moods, believing that if they were unhappy, it must be because you failed to be good enough, quiet enough, or invisible enough. You learned quickly that your greatest power was in predicting the next emotional storm, in becoming the tiny, trembling emotional caretaker of a person who was fundamentally incapable of caring for you in return. This wasn't a choice. It was a pure, instinctual survival mechanism. The only way a vulnerable child could make sense of a love that felt dangerously conditional. The logic was simple, yet devastating. If you were the cause of their pain, you could also control their well-being by simply making yourself smaller, more pliable, and less demanding of emotional bandwidth. The ache of that early environment is not something that simply evaporates when you turn 18. It settles deep into your nervous system, a primal memory of danger that instructs you to avoid detection at all costs. That child who once carried the unbearable weight of a parent's emotional life still exists inside of you, whispering warnings of disruption and failure whenever you feel the urge to speak your truth or simply relax into genuine joy. The adult impulse to minimize yourself is nothing more than the perfected, highly successful coping mechanism developed by a brilliant child who had to adapt to an impossible situation. This constant, low-level stress taught your body to literally hold its breath, to keep the shoulders slightly hunched, to speak in a voice that is often too soft, as if the volume of your existence must always be dialed down. Even in moments of success or genuine happiness, a strange, internalized censor appears, urging you to not celebrate too loudly, not shine too brightly, lest you provoke the hidden envy or sudden disapproval that was so common in your childhood home. The pain originated not just in what they did, but in what they consistently failed to provide, a safe harbor for your developing, authentic self. The adult who minimizes themselves in a relationship is simply mirroring the emotional geometry of their first primary attachment, unconsciously recreating the familiar dynamic where one person's needs dominate and the others are systematically erased. You never learned what it felt like to have your feelings be the priority, or even a priority. And so you default to the role you mastered, the supportive, quietly suffering background character. This pattern of making yourself small is a testament to your childhood loyalty and extraordinary capacity for self-sacrifice, but it is a loyalty that is actively suffocating the adult you are meant to become. You'll notice this subtle shrinking when you defer entirely to a partner's preferences, even when you have strong desires of your own, or when you find yourself perpetually agreeing with a friend just to keep the peace and maintain the fragile connection. The inner voice screams, "Don't rock the boat, don't challenge the consensus," because as a child, rocking the boat meant emotional abandonment or blistering criticism. This is the long-term and painful echo of that need to maintain proximity to an unreliable source of love. The irony is that this self-effacement, which was once your shield, is now the heaviest chain you drag, preventing you from forming the very deep, honest connections your soul truly yearns for. True intimacy requires two whole, visible people, and when you are constantly hiding or minimizing a significant part of yourself, you are preventing yourself from ever being truly seen and loved for who you authentically are. The origin of the pain is the wound of invisibility. The adult habit is the continued unconscious choice to remain unseen. Healing, therefore, begins with the simple, revolutionary act of witnessing that pain and recognizing that the child was never, ever responsible for the parent's dysfunction. You survived by shrinking, but you will thrive by expanding, by allowing yourself to take up all the glorious, messy, complicated space that you deserve in this world. The journey starts with understanding that the act of making yourself small was a necessary, ingenious survival tool that has now outlived its purpose and can finally be gently laid down. The dynamic in which you make yourself small is the result of a profound, early role inversion, a painful phenomenon where the natural order of caretaking was flipped on its head. Instead of being the one who was nurtured, guided, and emotionally protected, you were cast as the adult in the room, the one who had to anticipate, soothe, and manage the erratic emotional landscape of your parent. This wasn't simply being helpful. This was the forced parentification of your inner child, sacrificing your own developmental needs to ensure the psychological stability of the home. This process taught you an extraordinary, almost psychic ability to read the environment, not for simple social cues, but for subtle signs of imminent parental displeasure or emotional need. You became a hyper-attuned emotional radar, constantly scanning faces, listening to tones of voice, and analyzing silences. The goal was always the same: to preemptively adjust your behavior, to become the stabilizer of the parent's unstable self, to intervene before a crisis erupted, thereby guaranteeing your own short-term safety. The tragedy of this inversion is that the child, in becoming the stabilizer, had to actively suppress and ignore their own tumultuous feelings, which were always seen as an added burden or a source of complication for the already strained parent. If you were scared, you couldn't cry. You had to be the strong one. If you were sick, you couldn't complain. You had to manage your discomfort silently. This continuous act of self-negation is the core mechanism that leads to the adult habit of chronic self-minimization. In adulthood, this perfected skill set manifests as the inability to receive, a deep discomfort with being cared for, and an automatic tendency to assume all the heavy lifting in any relationship, whether emotional or practical. When a partner attempts to nurture you, the inverted role script activates, triggering a profound, visceral anxiety because receiving care feels alien, dangerous, and profoundly disruptive to your well-honed self-image as the perpetually competent giver. The compulsion to overgive, to overperform, and to perpetually put others' needs before your own is the echo of the parentified child still operating the controls. You unconsciously believe that the only way you can justify your existence in a relationship is through your utility, your constant service, or your emotional output, never simply for the inherent value of your being. This is the most painful form of self-erasure, where your love is translated into a performance of worthiness. The adult who learned role inversion is often the one who is exhausted, resentful, and utterly burnt out because they are still running on the old, impossible programming that they must constantly earn the right to exist and be loved. You are still holding your breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the parentified adult to finally get permission to rest. This inability to surrender to relaxation or to delegate responsibility is a direct symptom of that early role reversal. To begin to undo this, you must consciously and repeatedly practice the revolutionary act of letting someone else hold the emotional space or carry the burden, even if it feels terrifyingly foreign. This is not selfishness. This is finally correcting a fundamental error in your original life programming, a profound act of self-reparenting. The work is to gently fire the hypervigilant child manager and welcome the vulnerable, deserving adult. The most subtle sign of this inversion is the feeling that you are constantly translating your own inner experience into a language that is palatable or easily digestible for others. ensuring your emotions never inconvenience them. You are still the emotional interpreter for the world, always prioritizing external comfort over your own internal integrity, which is the very definition of making yourself small. The adult habit of self-minimization can be emotionally understood through the psychological mechanisms of parentification and hypervigilance, which are not clinical labels to fear, but emotional truths to understand and embrace with compassion. Parentification is the emotional theft of your childhood, the premature demand to function as a capable adult when your soul was still a vulnerable, developing child. It forces you into a perpetual state of performance, where your success is measured not by your natural growth, but by your ability to manage the needs of others. Coupled with this is hypervigilance, your most brilliant and exhausting survival response, the sixth sense you develop to constantly monitor your surroundings for emotional danger. This isn't paranoia, it's a deeply intelligent response to an unpredictable environment, where your nervous system learned to prioritize external cues over internal feelings, because the external reality was the only measure of your immediate safety. This is why, as an adult, you can walk into a room and instantly feel the mood, often absorbing it like a sponge. This hypervigilance means your nervous system is essentially always set to a low-grade alarm, always searching for the next potential threat, which drains your emotional battery at an astonishing rate. It manifests as chronic exhaustion, the inability to fully relax, and a constant, low-level anxiety that feels like a foundational part of your personality, but is, in fact, a deeply ingrained trauma response. The act of making yourself small is the hypervigilant system's attempt to fly under the radar, to make a smaller target for the perceived imminent threat. The constant internal chatter. Did I say that wrong? Are they angry? Should I text back now or wait? Is the sound of the hypervigilant mind still attempting to manage and control the uncontrollable emotional environment of the past? This self-editing, this perpetual second-guessing, is a primary way you learned to minimize your true self, only allowing out what you deemed safe and acceptable to your internalized critic who sounds suspiciously like your parent. Understanding these concepts emotionally allows you to shift from self-blame to self-compassion. You didn't choose to be anxious or people-pleasing. You developed complex, sophisticated tools to survive an environment that denied your fundamental right to be an emotionally open child. These patterns were once essential for your survival, a testament to your resilience, but now they are the obstacles to your freedom. The profound psychological truth here is that the smaller you made yourself, the safer you believed you were, which is why reclaiming your space and your voice feels like a dangerous, rebellious act. The fear isn't of success or attention. The fear is of the inevitable punishment that your nervous system associates with finally being seen, and therefore, becoming a target. Healing from this requires the patient, gentle work of teaching your nervous system a new truth, that the danger is over and that your adult self is capable of handling conflict and disagreement without your emotional or physical existence being threatened. It means intentionally turning down the volume on that hypervigilant radar, choosing to trust your present reality over the distorted, threat-laden echoes of your past. To embrace your full size is to consciously unparentify yourself, to let go of the impossible responsibility you never should have carried, and to allow yourself the grace and imperfection of a regular, fallible, and fully seen human being. This is the process of gently dismantling the architecture of self-minimization, one intentional moment of authentic self-expression at a time. The necessity of making yourself small led to a fundamental fracture in your identity, where the authentic self had to go into hiding, replaced by a meticulously constructed performer identity. This performer is the one who is charming, capable, constantly agreeable, and always anticipating the needs of others. The perfect child, the perfect employee, the perfect friend. Because perfection was the only perceived path to love and safety. The authentic self, with its messy, true needs, its honest feelings, and its legitimate anger, was deemed too dangerous to reveal. This process is experienced as profound masking and an eerie, internal sense of self-disappearance. When you're alone, you might feel a strange emptiness or a lack of clarity about what you truly enjoy or desire, because your life has been a perpetual feedback loop of reflecting what others want to see. The performer is so skilled that even you, the owner of the mask, often struggle to tell where the act ends and the real person begins, which is a lonely and disorienting consequence of narcissistic parenting. The performer identity is constantly exhausting because it operates on a transactional premise. I must perform my worth in order to receive love. There is no room for mistakes, failure, or even just a bad day, because any disruption to the performance risks triggering the deep-seated fear of rejection or abandonment that your parent taught you. This is why the adult child of a narcissist often suffers from profound perfectionism and an inability to simply be without doing. The most painful manifestation of this masked identity is the feeling of chronic unlovability, a deeply held visceral conviction that if people knew the real you, the imperfect, flawed, sometimes difficult, authentic self, they would surely leave. This keeps you locked in the prison of the performer, constantly editing, filtering, and minimizing any part of your personality that might be deemed controversial or burdensome. You may find yourself becoming a chameleon in different social settings, effortlessly mirroring the tone and interests of the person you are with, only to go home and feel a deep confusion about who you actually are. This is the performer identity expertly adapting to ensure survival. But it comes at the cost of genuine self-connection, making it incredibly difficult to set boundaries or even know what boundaries you need. The journey of healing requires a courageous, intentional dismantling of the performance, a conscious commitment to letting the mask slip, even if it feels terrifying and exposed. This starts with small, private acts of authenticity, allowing yourself to have an unpopular opinion, to say no without a lengthy justification, or to simply choose what you want to eat without consulting 3 other people first. The work is about patiently, kindly coaxing the authentic self out of hiding, reassuring that deeply wounded inner child that the world is now safe enough to tolerate their true expression. You are seeking to integrate the capable performer with the vulnerable, deserving authentic self, recognizing that the performance was a temporary, necessary costume, not the essence of your being. The eventual goal is to stop earning love and start simply receiving it, which requires the profound shift of believing that you are inherently worthy, not just conditionally worthy based on your performance or your smallness. This is the most profound reclamation of identity, allowing the true light of who you are to shine, without the self-minimizing filter. If you're recognizing yourself in this narrative, if the deep ache of having to make yourself small resonates with the truth you've always felt but couldn't name, please take a moment. I want you to know you are not alone in this. This wound is incredibly common among adult children of narcissistic parents. I'd love for you to share one small, subtle habit you've noticed where you instinctively minimize yourself. Maybe it's apologizing for existing, or constantly deferring your choice to others. Just copy and paste this into the comments and fill in the blank. The habit I'm ready to break is, and here, write what you want. Sharing this vulnerability helps every single person who reads it feel seen and understood. Beneath the highly functional, self-minimizing adult is the silent wound of the inner child, whose unmet needs continue to drive the majority of your adult behaviors and emotional responses. This is the child who was never truly seen, whose tears were ignored, whose triumphs were co-opted, and whose simple, fundamental needs for secure attachment and validation were consistently denied. That little person is still present, silently aching for the safety and the loving attention they never received. The compulsion to make yourself small is, at its core, the inner child's desperate plea for safety, a deeply ingrained belief that the only way to get some form of attention or attachment is to be as undemanding and unobtrusive as possible. Every time you shrink your desires, you are listening to that inner child's desperate, old programming, repeating the painful truth that their needs don't matter and are not safe to express. The irony of this silent wound is that the very minimization that was designed to protect the child now prevents the adult from getting the genuine needs met. You are so skilled at suppressing your inner life that when someone finally asks what you need, you might genuinely not know the answer, because that voice has been silenced for so long it's become inaudible even to yourself. This inner child often manifests as a strange, deep sense of loneliness, even when surrounded by people who love you, because the child's original, core need, to be fully accepted and loved unconditionally, was never satisfied. The self-minimizing adult can collect friends, partners, and accolades, but the inner child feels profoundly alone, still waiting for the single, vital form of nourishment that never arrived. The process of healing must involve turning toward this silent wound with profound honesty and gentleness, recognizing that the child was not the problem. The environment was. You must become the kind, consistent, unconditionally loving parent to the child you once were, finally acknowledging their pain and validating their entirely legitimate needs. Every time you choose to speak your truth, to set a boundary, or to prioritize your rest, you are sending a powerful, corrective message to that inner child. You are safe now, and your needs matter. This is not about becoming a new person. It is about reclaiming the authentic, vibrant self that was forced into the shadows by necessity. The self-minimizing habit is simply the manifestation of a starving inner child. Your self-compassion is the nourishment that finally allows them to come out of hiding and relax into their rightful space. The adult work is to consciously, patiently, and repeatedly give the child what they were always entitled to, but never received. This deep listening to the inner child's needs, for comfort, for reassurance, for space, for simple joy, is the most direct route to ending the compulsion to make yourself small. When you can finally meet your own needs with consistency, you break the painful cycle of needing to earn love by becoming small for others. The silent wound and the performer identity don't stay hidden. They manifest in a series of distinct adult patterns that keep you stuck in the loop of self-minimization, especially in your most important relationships. One of the most painful is the pervasive difficulty with trust, where you are constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, even with people who have proven themselves to be reliable and kind. This trust issue stems from the original, foundational breach of trust with your parent, making every healthy relationship feel inherently unstable and conditional. This shows up as a constant need for reassurance, an obsessive rereading of text messages, or the tendency to self-sabotage a good relationship by unconsciously creating the conflict you anticipate. You learned early that what you felt was true, that your parent loved you, was often contradicted by what they did, leading to a deep reliance on external evidence rather than internal feeling, which is why you struggle to just relax into simple, unearned affection. The next manifestation is a perpetually fragile self-worth, which is entirely conditional and tied to your productivity, your performance, or your usefulness to others. When your self-worth is low, you instinctively make yourself small because your value is not seen as inherent, but as something you must constantly achieve. This means that taking a day of rest feels inherently wrong, like a moral failing, because resting is the opposite of performing, and performance is how you unconsciously secure your right to exist. In terms of emotional regulation, the adult self-minimizer often struggles to identify or articulate their own emotions, defaulting to what the other person is feeling or simply shutting down entirely. This is the legacy of the parentified child who was forbidden to have their own big feelings. You learn to suppress anything that might disrupt the parent's mood. And now, as an adult, those feelings are locked away, only emerging as diffuse anxiety or sudden overwhelming bursts of resentment. The self-minimizing habit appears concretely in relationships when you are unable to articulate a boundary, defaulting to silent resentment rather than risk conflict. It is the automatic acceptance of poor treatment, the refusal to end a relationship that is clearly detrimental, all because the inner survival mechanism prioritizes attachment, any attachment, over the protection of your self-respect and well-being. The profound insight here is that you are not simply bad at boundaries or self-care. You are operating on a decades-old survival script that prioritized external needs above all else. And your adult manifestations are the system's way of clinging to that familiar Umbrichat's painful sense of control. You are repeating the patterns you were taught, not because you are weak, but because the neural pathways for self-sacrifice are the deepest, most well-worn roads in your mind. Healing involves the intentional, daily practice of disrupting these patterns, of choosing to speak the small truth, to set the small boundary, and to take the radical act of self-honoring rest. Each small choice to show up fully, to take up space, slowly rewrites the adult manifestation of the childhood wound. The adult manifestation of making yourself small is a constant, low-level leakage of life force, a chronic under-realization of your true potential, and a perpetual, exhausting fear of fully letting your guard down. The only way out is through the conscious, courageous choice to stop performing and start living. The profound reason you keep minimizing yourself, even when you logically know it hurts, lies in your biological, emotional reasoning, the instinctual need for attachment. For a child, attachment is survival. It is not a choice, but a biological imperative. And the human system is hardwired to seek and maintain connection to the primary caregiver at any cost. In the context of narcissistic parenting, this meant the child had to make a painful, lifelong choice, the sacrifice of authenticity for the sake of proximity. Your brain reasoned, on a primal level, it is better to be in proximity to an inconsistent, hurtful parent than to face the absolute threat of total abandonment. This is the origin of the self-minimizing behavior. It was the strategic sacrifice of your true self, your true needs, and your emotional truth in exchange for a conditional but crucial form of attachment. The survival mechanism is that strong. This means the adult who is terrified of conflict or disagreement is not weak. They are simply responding from the primal core of their being, where conflict was once directly linked to the threat of separation. The anxiety you feel when contemplating a boundary is the sound of your infant brain screaming, "Do not risk losing the necessary connection," which is why the self-minimizing choice feels instantly safer, even if it brings long-term pain. This biological reasoning explains the painful attraction to partners who are emotionally unavailable or narcissistic, as the system unconsciously mistakes the familiarity of the dynamic for genuine safety. You are pulled back to the emotional geometry of your first attachment because that is what your system knows how to navigate, even though it requires the painful, well-practiced habit of making yourself small to survive. The constant internal dialogue of self-doubt and self-gaslighting, "It wasn't that bad, I'm overreacting, it's my fault," is the biological brain's attempt to maintain stability. If the parent was wrong, it creates a terrifying reality of an unstable world and an unsafe attachment. If you were wrong, it maintains the illusion of predictability and control, which is the system's preferred coping mechanism. The essential healing work is to lovingly confront this powerful instinct, to recognize the survival script without allowing it to drive your current choices. You must consciously, repeatedly introduce a new emotional truth into your biological reasoning. That true safety is found in authenticity, not in self-erasure. This means intentionally choosing relationships and dynamics where authenticity is rewarded and received, not punished. It is the slow, courageous work of teaching your primal brain that you are no longer a dependent child whose survival hinges on minimizing itself for an erratic caregiver. The ultimate goal of reclaiming your full size is the integration of this biological truth with your adult consciousness, allowing the fierce, protective instinct for attachment to finally relax and trust that the adult you has the capacity to self-protect and find true, healthy connection. You are not betraying your survival. You are simply upgrading your method of thriving. The sum total of these patterns, the parentification, the hypervigilance, the masked identity, leads to profound, deep consequences that manifest as internal narratives, relational difficulties, and deeply entrenched coping styles. The most damaging internal narrative is the constant, self-punishing loop that dictates you are fundamentally flawed, too much, or not enough. An internalized voice that constantly minimizes your achievements and exaggerates your failures. This is the most painful echo of the narcissistic parent's voice. The relational effects are often cyclical, where you perpetually recreate the self-minimizing dynamic, either by attracting narcissistic or needy partners, or by instinctively defaulting to the caretaker role, leaving you emotionally depleted and feeling perpetually unseen. This isn't bad luck. It's the unconscious repetition compulsion driven by the nervous system's need to resolve the trauma through reenactment. Your coping styles are often highly functional but deeply unsustainable. Overworking, obsessive planning, chronic people-pleasing, or the tendency to emotionally dissociate when things become overwhelming. These coping mechanisms were once your saviors, ensuring you remained small, competent, and therefore conditionally safe. But now they are the primary source of your exhaustion and inability to experience genuine joy. The deep consequence of making yourself small is the feeling of chronic unreality. The sense that you are watching your life from a slight distance, never fully embodied in your own experience. This is the cost of living life through the performer identity, where the authentic self is locked away, and the world is only experienced through a filtered, edited lens. You may be successful and admired, but still feel profoundly empty. A primary consequence is the profound difficulty with emotional spontaneity, where every genuine feeling must be analyzed, edited, and approved by the inner critic before it can be expressed. This suppression of authentic emotion is the essence of self-minimization, leading to an adult life that feels carefully managed, but joylessly constrained. The path to reversing these deep consequences begins with the radical act of self-witnessing, allowing yourself to see the internal narratives and the painful coping styles not as flaws, but as the ingenious, temporary solutions they once were. You must give yourself permission to stop the ceaseless performance and simply be. This intentional choice to stop making yourself small is the first step in dismantling the negative internal narrative, replacing the parent's critical voice with the gentle, validating voice of your adult self. This is the beginning of reclaiming your internal landscape. The deep work is recognizing that the consequences you live with today are a legacy you can consciously choose to end, not a sentence you must serve. You can redirect your enormous energy from survival and self-minimization toward genuine thriving and self-expression. The absolute first step to dissolving the habit of self-minimization is the radical practice of awareness and witnessing. You must stop engaging in the painful habit of self-gaslighting, the insidious process where you minimize your own pain, telling yourself it wasn't that bad or you're overreacting. This self-invalidation is the continuation of the abuse, and the most powerful necessary intervention is to simply look at your reality with honest, compassionate eyes. Witnessing means observing the moments you shrink, the automatic apology, the hunched posture, the silence when you desperately want to speak, without judgment. It is the act of gently turning to your inner self and saying, "I see you. That was a moment of minimization, and I understand why you did it, because you were trying to be safe." This simple act of recognition breaks the cycle of unconscious action. To witness is to give credence to the reality of your past pain, to honor the profound impact of what you endured, and to finally stop defending the very people who caused your wound. This is not about condemnation. It is about truth-telling within the safe space of your own mind, recognizing that your responses are entirely normal for what you went through. The practice of breaking self-gaslighting involves literally narrating your feelings to yourself, giving your emotions full, unapologetic names. I am feeling profound anger right now. I am feeling intense sadness. This is real, and it is valid. This anchors you in your own reality, preventing the slide back into the minimized, self-doubtful state. Conscious witnessing separates the past from the present, allowing you to see the self-minimizing response as an echo of danger, not a present threat. This critical separation creates the space for you to choose a new action, to intentionally choose the full, dyed, authentic response instead of the reflexive, minimized one. This is the foundational work of healing, the moment you step out of the fog of self-blame and into the clear, empowering light of self-responsibility and self-compassion. You are finally becoming the trustworthy witness and protector that the child within always needed. The moment you become aware of the habit, you create the possibility of change. Your awareness is the key that unlocks the prison of the past. This isn't about fixing the habit immediately, but about observing it with gentle curiosity, noting how and when the minimization occurs. Embrace the profound truth that your pain is real, your experience is valid, and you have every right to take up your full, beautiful, complex human space. This is the beginning of the end of self-minimization. The most insidious manifestation of self-minimization is the high-functioning adult wound, where you are outwardly successful, competent, and responsible, yet still inwardly carry the heavy, draining patterns of survival. This is the person who is the go-to at work, the reliable friend, the one who seems to effortlessly manage everything, but is constantly exhausted by the internal motor of chronic responsibility. This chronic responsibility is the carryover from parentification, the unwavering belief that if you don't do it, it simply won't get done. Or worse, that someone will suffer because of your failure to manage them. This inability to delegate or to trust others stems from the deep toddler's early lesson that you could only rely on yourself to keep the emotional environment stable. The high-functioning adult is often a master of emotional suppression, having perfected the art of smiling, appearing calm, and downplaying their own struggles. This is self-minimization in its most sophisticated form, a profound, internal erasure of genuine emotional distress in order to maintain the external image of competence and control. The cost of this constant high-functioning is a profound sense of burnout that is often misdiagnosed as simple stress or poor time management. Your system is perpetually running in crisis mode, constantly giving and never receiving, because the survival script demands you remain the reliable resource, not the vulnerable human being. The antidote to the high-functioning wound is the radical permission to be imperfect, to fail publicly and survive, to delegate a task and allow someone else to handle it. This is the necessary, terrifying act of intentionally giving up control, knowing that the world will not fall apart just because you choose to rest or prioritize your own needs. The habit of making yourself small is often masked by the sheer volume of your output. You compensate for the feeling of being unseen by becoming indispensable. The healing involves separating your inherent worth from your productivity, a fundamental shift that allows you to simply be without constantly doing. This means recognizing that the impulse to jump in and solve every problem is not virtuous. It is a trauma response. The high-functioning adult needs to intentionally practice the profound self-care of allowing themselves to be ordinary, messy, and dependent sometimes. The most powerful act of self-reclamation is the conscious choice to step out of the spotlight of performance and into the quiet, safe space of self-care, choosing rest over chronic responsibility. You have earned the right to simply exist. To truly move past the habit of self-minimization, you must first acknowledge it as a legacy, a set of coping mechanisms passed down, not an inherent flaw in your character. The subtle, everyday signs of this legacy are critical to recognize, such as the deeply ingrained pattern of breath holding. You may unconsciously constrict your breathing when you enter a new situation, prepare to speak, or encounter conflict, a physical manifestation of trying to minimize your presence and hold in your true emotional state. Another telling sign is the constant need for permission seeking, the internalized loop that requires external validation or approval before you can make a choice, set a boundary, or pursue a desire. This is the adult child still waiting for the erratic parent to grant them the right to their own life, an act that never came and will never come. The core of the legacy is the pervasive feeling of unentitlement, the conviction that you are not fully entitled to your space, your feelings, your time, or your simple, unearned joy. This lack of entitlement is why you struggle to receive compliments, accept help, or negotiate a better position for yourself. Your system still believes you must remain small to avoid provoking the powerful figure who once controlled your emotional reality. The profound work of breaking this legacy is to intentionally act as though you are entitled, to choose the bigger breath, the confident statement, and the unilateral decision without waiting for the permission that will never arrive. This will feel initially terrifying, as it goes directly against decades of ingrained survival programming. Recognizing the legacy means finally understanding that your struggles are not your fault, but the predictable, painful outcome of an impossible childhood environment. This shift from self-blame to compassionate understanding is the most powerful tool you possess. The next time you catch yourself breath-holding or permission-seeking, gently name it as the legacy it is. Say to yourself, "This is the old script. I choose a new script now." Then, take a deep, unapologetic breath and make your own decision. The legacy of self-minimization is not the truth of who you are, but the protective shell you built to survive. It is time to gently step out of that shell and allow yourself the full, vibrant life you are absolutely entitled to. The final powerful solution to self-minimization is the reparenting process, the conscious intentional act of inner child healing, where you deliberately give what was not received. This is not a symbolic act. It is the concrete, daily practice of meeting your own emotional needs with the consistent, unconditional love that your parent could never provide. This process requires a profound shift, recognizing that the only person who can truly meet the core needs of your inner child is you, the adult you have become. You must become the gentle, trustworthy witness who validates the child's pain, reassures their fears, and consistently prioritizes their well-being. The most effective form of reparenting is the granting of unconditional self-acceptance, allowing yourself to be perfectly imperfect, to make mistakes, to have bad days, and to still be worthy of love and care. This is the direct antidote to the conditional love you received, which demanded self-minimization as the entry fee for connection. When you feel the urge to shrink, the reparenting response is to deliberately take up space, to physically stretch, to speak your truth, to set the boundary, and to prioritize your own joy. This is you teaching your inner child that the world is now safe enough for their full expression. The act of giving what was not received can be as simple as pausing to ask yourself, what does my inner child need from me right now? The answer might be rest, play, comfort, or simply the validation. It's okay to feel this way. The reparenting process is the sustained effort of changing the internal script from one of self-minimization to one of radical self-advocacy. You are breaking the cycle of emotional neglect by choosing to consistently nurture the self who was once neglected. This process is not about blaming the parent. It is about choosing your own freedom. It is the conscious, daily commitment to allowing your full, authentic self to emerge from the shadow of the past, finally giving yourself the permission you were always waiting for. As you commit to the reparenting process, you will inevitably enter the necessary work of shadow work, which is the courageous process of turning toward pain with honesty and sitting with grief. The habit of self-minimization was a way to avoid the profound pain of childhood neglect. But true healing requires you to gently lift that protective shield and finally acknowledge the depth of the wound. Shadow work is the process of confronting the parts of yourself you were forced to suppress and deny, your anger, your rage, your profound sadness, and your legitimate need for fierce protection. The minimized adult often struggles with anger because, as a child, that emotion was forbidden and terrifying, so it was forced into the shadow. To turn toward pain is to allow yourself to grieve the childhood you deserved but never received, the lost moments of unconditional love, the absent guidance, the simple, consistent safety. This grief is a natural, necessary part of the healing process, and it must be honored, not minimized or suppressed. Sitting with grief means creating safe, intentional space to simply feel the sadness, without needing to fix it, explain it, or apologize for it. This is the most profound act of self-acceptance, allowing the painful, truthful feelings to finally be seen and validated. The minimized self is often terrified of the vastness of their inner pain, but shadow work teaches you that you are strong enough to hold it, to witness it, and to integrate it. The pain is not a monster. It is a profound truth that only asks to be acknowledged and cared for. When you embrace your shadow, you begin to reclaim the power that was once suppressed, turning your internalized self-minimization into self-empowerment. The willingness to confront your pain is the ultimate act of taking up your full space. The shadow work is simply the work of making yourself whole, integrating the suppressed parts with the capable, high-functioning adult. It is the journey from fragmentation and minimization to integration and wholeness. The self-minimization pattern is nowhere more visible than in your adult relationships, where the old scripts are played out in high definition. You will find yourself automatically apologizing for things that are not your fault, often multiple times a day, a reflexive self-minimizing habit that signals, "I am not a threat. Please don't be angry with me." Another common relational example is the inability to articulate a simple preference, defaulting to deferring all choices to your partner or friends. Whatever you want is fine. I don't care. You decide. This isn't flexibility, it's the quiet, passive self-minimization of your own desires, born from the fear that your desire might be met with criticism or indifference. You may find yourself becoming the chronic emotional caretaker in all your close relationships, endlessly listening, soothing, and problem-solving for others, while never receiving the same in return. This is the parentified child still on duty, proving their worth through utility and keeping their own needs tightly minimized. The insidious sign of self-minimization is the silent resignation to poor treatment. The internal narrative that says, "This is all I deserve, I shouldn't rock the boat." You stay in relationships long past their expiration date because the terror of abandonment outweighs the pain of minimizing your own self-respect. Healing in the relational sphere means intentionally practicing small acts of assertion, starting with a simple, genuine, "I would actually prefer this." It means letting someone else feel their own emotions without immediately jumping in to fix them, breaking the caretaker script. The goal is to move from a dynamic where you are constantly minimizing yourself to one where both you and your partner can be fully present, fully seen, and equally valued. This requires choosing partners who celebrate your full size, not those who require you to shrink. Your self-minimizing habits are not signs of a lack of love, but signs of a deep, historical fear. Consciously choosing to be fully present and assertive in your relationships is the profound act of breaking the inherited chain of self-minimization. To truly facilitate the reparenting process and dismantle the self-minimizing script, you must turn inward and ask the foundational questions of your inner child, the core of which is, what did the inner child need that they never received? This question requires honesty and compassion, guiding you toward the emotional needs that are still driving your adult behavior. The emotional needs you were denied might include unconditional love, consistent safety, mirroring, the reflection of your true self, validation of your feelings, and the simple permission to be imperfect. The self-minimization habit is the adult system's flawed attempt to meet those needs through performance. Ask yourself, what would a truly loving, healthy parent have done in that situation? Would they have dismissed your tears? Would they have required you to manage their mood? The answer provides the script for the corrective, reparenting response you must now give yourself. Another vital question is, what truth did I have to swallow in order to survive? The suppressed truth, your anger, your right to autonomy, your sense of injustice, is the energy you need to reclaim to stop minimizing yourself. The process of asking these foundational questions is the ultimate act of self-witnessing, finally giving a voice to the silent wound and validating the legitimacy of your earliest, deepest emotional needs. This is how you begin to heal the fragmentation. Once you name the need, the next step is the conscious, daily commitment to meeting that need yourself. Whether it's through self-soothing, setting a fierce boundary, or simply allowing yourself a moment of genuine, unapologetic self-care. This is the foundation of self-trust. The journey from self-minimization to wholeness is the journey of answering these questions with radical honesty and then acting as the loving advocate for the child within. You are reclaiming your right to a fully nourished emotional life. The transformation from the self-minimizing adult to the fully embodied, authentic self is not a sudden event, but a gradual emergence where new patterns emerge and replace the old, painful scripts. The first and most profound new pattern is the establishment of safety, both physical and emotional. This means intentionally creating an environment where you are truly safe to be imperfect, to struggle, and to take up all the space you need. This newfound safety allows for the emergence of firm, compassionate boundaries, which are the concrete manifestation of valuing yourself. A boundary is not about punishing others. It is about protecting your own internal space, a self-honoring act that directly opposes the self-minimizing tendency. The ultimate transformation is the embrace of authenticity, the conscious choice to allow your true self, with all its flaws and brilliance, to be seen. This is the end of the performer identity and the beginning of a life lived in integrity, where your external actions finally align with your internal truth. The process of transformation involves turning your self-minimizing energy outward, using your hypervigilance for self-awareness and your capacity for care to nurture your own inner world. You are using the very tools of your survival for the powerful work of thriving. Transformation is the intentional act of creating a life where you no longer need to be small to be loved, where your full size is not only accepted, but celebrated. This requires you to consciously break the old patterns, one small act of self-assertion at a time. The new patterns of safety, boundaries, and authenticity are the scaffolding upon which your reclaimed, full-sized self is built. This is the shift from reacting to your past to consciously creating your future. In this profound journey from self-minimization to wholeness, it is helpful to lean on external wisdom to anchor the new consciousness. The psychologist Carl Jung often spoke about the process of integration, and in the context of self-minimization, his truth is emotionally relevant. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. This is the very essence of the transformation you are undertaking. The habit of self-minimization is what happened to you, a survival response imposed by a difficult environment. Your conscious choice to stop shrinking is what you choose to become. This external wisdom reminds you that your past does not define your destiny. It simply provided the difficult, necessary lessons that led you to this moment of profound self-reclamation. The power to change is in your hands, in this present moment, in every small choice you make to take up space. The ultimate consciousness shift is recognizing that you are the author of your future, no longer the reluctant actor in a script written by your past. The self-minimizing habit is simply the old, dusty chapter you are now bravely closing. We must now redefine healing itself, stripping away the misconception that it is about becoming new or transcending your past. True healing from the wound of self-minimization is fundamentally about reclaiming identity, not discarding it. It is the process of gently peeling back the layers of the performer identity to reveal the authentic, vibrant self that was always there, waiting in the shadows. Healing is not a destination where all pain disappears. It is the process of integration, where you embrace your history, including the wounds and the incredible coping mechanisms. Without allowing them to dictate your present, you integrate the high-functioning competence with the vulnerable inner child, creating a whole, resilient, and fully human self. To reclaim your identity is to finally and unapologetically accept your full size, your full range of emotions, your imperfections, and your immense worth. It is the end of the transactional, self-minimizing performance and the beginning of a life lived in unconditional self-acceptance. This is the simple, profound truth. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be uncovered. You are already whole and worthy. The work is simply to believe it and to act in alignment with that truth. This journey to end the habit of making yourself small culminates in the ending integration, the reflective moment of becoming whole and the peaceful, profound reconnecting with the inner child. The adult self now stands as the consistent protector, the loving parent, and the fierce advocate for the child within. Integration means that the impulse to shrink will still occasionally appear, but it will no longer control you. You will notice it, honor it as the old survival mechanism it is, and then consciously choose the full, authentic response. You have traded the painful, chronic performance of self-minimization for the quiet, powerful truth of your inherent worth. This is the peaceful final step of reclaiming your full emotional and physical space in the world. If this message has resonated with you, if it has illuminated the hidden scripts that have kept you small, please take a moment to like this video. When you hit that like button, you're not just supporting this channel. You are sending a signal to your own system that this message of self-reclamation is important and worthy of being seen. This community is here to hold space for the difficult, beautiful work of healing, and we need your support to reach others who are still silently struggling with the legacy of self-minimization. The path to feeling truly understood starts here. Now, if you are ready to continue this journey of becoming whole, of finally allowing yourself to take up your full, deserving space, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you are committing to your own healing and ensuring you receive the continuous guidance, validation, and care that was once missing. This is a community built on trust and the belief that you deserve a life free from the prison of your past. We are here to walk with you as you reclaim your true, full size. Thank you for your courage. This is the ultimate shift. You are not becoming a new self, but finally becoming the true self. You survived by being small, but you will thrive by expanding, by allowing yourself all the messy, complicated, and utterly beautiful reality of who you truly are. Step fully into your life, release the need to minimize, and embrace the power of your full, authentic presence. You are finally home.